Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to episode 65 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Co-op Financial Services. Co-op is your trusted payments processing partner whose mission it is to drive the credit union movement forward. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Todd Clark. Todd is the president and CEO of Co-op Financial Services, who happens to be our sponsor. Todd and I have been actually talking about having this conversation for probably almost a year. Last year at Co-op Think, I was a host on the Think stage and got to interview Todd, and we both enjoyed the conversation, and it's been a lot of fun over the past year to get to know Todd more as we both run around this world we call credit unions. This episode, I'm going to tell you, did not disappoint. Todd had such amazing information to share on the future of credit unions, on building great teams, and how to lead in a time of fast-paced change in our industry. My guess is we're going to all take a bunch of nuggets out of this one. Did you know that he had a thriving business in high school, started his first company when he was in college? I mean, there was so much to learn and to get to know Todd better in this episode. As always, we have some fun in the end with the rapid-fire questions to wrap up the whole show. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with Todd Clark. Enjoy. Todd, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to this. You and I have talked about it for quite some time over the past year. I think that maybe the first time was when we were getting ready to go on to the Think stage last year at Co-op Think, when we both realized that we were a couple of introverts that have to play extroverts for credit unions. And you know, one of the things, you join a fine list of guests on the podcast, George Hoffheimer, Ryan, Maria, but I know our listeners don't just want to sit here and enjoy us having some quiet time. So we'll jump right into it. One of the conversations in the past year that you and I have had, I've noticed that you have the word platform. You know, it just seems to keep coming back up when we're having this conversation. So what does a co-op platform look like, and how do credit unions benefit from this?
Yeah, let me start, Randy, by one, thanking you for having me on the show, but two, let's go to this platform. You know, platform is not it's not a piece of technology. It's not a box or something like that. We think of it as a way to describe the ecosystem that we're trying to build. And so the way I think about co-op and the way my team thinks about co-op is that we're this kind of collaborative group of technologists that are here to serve the credit union industry. And so our job is to listen to what our credit unions say and then enable them to do that, right? And so with roughly 3,000 credit unions, they all have different technology needs. And so the way we think about our ecosystem and our platform is a way that we can move data in and out relatively with ease. It's not, like I said, not a box or an operating system of any kind, but rather it's a solution and a system designed with open APIs and the use of microservices that allow our credit unions to access all of our tools. And much like other platform type businesses, and let me just tell you about a couple of platform businesses, right? Amazon and Netflix are platform type businesses. And so the notion here is that we can load more and more products into the platform, right? And today that's credit and debit and shared branching and contact center. But every time we add a new product, and just pick a product, if it were some sort of micro loan product or something like that, then it would be easy to add, meaning that we didn't have to rewrite the entire reporting system or the entire billing system or the security and fraud prevention system, because those are already inherent to the platform. And so that's how we think about it.
Was this a big change? I mean, from a company standpoint, it kind of sounds like a monumental shift from maybe just being the shared branching and payments platform, and maybe it wasn't even a platform at that point.
Absolutely. The shift was the notion that we're going to move from a reseller of somebody else's services to a creator and owner of technology. And so that's been the big shift over the last, I'm at my 3.5, just a little past my 3.5 year anniversary.
Yep.
For the first 6 months, all I did was go and listen to credit unions. Matter of fact, my team kind of jokes with me. They're like, where is he? Is he, is he working yet? And I saw roughly 75 credit unions in that first 6 months and spent time in some of their back offices, spent a lot of time with the CEOs saying, where are you going? What do you need? What are you afraid of? And then came back after that 6 months. And within a couple of months, we made the decision to acquire TMG, to integrate that in. And largely because we felt from a technology perspective, they were a bit ahead of us, right? From owning your own technology. They had already written a layer over the top of the now Fiserv Omaha platform and had moved it a bit to the background. And the goal here is not purposely, right? It's not my only goal, but it's a net effect of this platform type business that the partners we choose will be moved into the background because credit unions will be interfacing with our technology and our solutions rather than interfacing directly with the Fiservs or the FISs or the Agios or any other people in the world that we choose to partner with on some of the products.
That makes a ton of sense. It kind of brings me to my next question, which is, how do you at Co-op stay ahead of this pace of change? You talked about just in your last answer, TMG at the time being, looking at it and saying maybe they're a little bit ahead of us. So you acquired them. Is it through innovation on the inside, fast foul, or, obviously acquisition is a part of that strategy, or is it a combination of all of the above?
I think it's always a mix, Randy. The reality is every time we make a decision to bring something new to market, it's a build, buy, or partner type lens that we look at it through. And if we find a small company that has some technology we want, we would certainly think about acquiring them. And not to say that TMG was small by any means. That was a big big purchase, and the integration was complex and difficult. But we're through that now, and excited about where we're going in the future. And of course, we try and innovate, but I don't know that I believe it's credit unions' place to try and change payments, right? As much as it is to be ready to adapt and move quickly as payments change. There's 100 or 1,000 little companies out there that are innovating every day. And we have a whole team, roughly 8 or 9 people. That's their whole job, is to go look at those things and see if we can find pieces and parts of that we want to add into our product mix.
That sounds like a pretty fun job, actually. When you look at credit unions from 30,000 feet, is there something that you think we need to fundamentally change sooner rather than later to stay relevant in this fast-paced, ever-changing financial services space?
Well, I think it's always going to be more technology focused. Right. We're in an age of technology, and technology is solving a lot of problems for people all over the place, right? The credit unions have this pre-existing relationship, and they have that trust level built up. But I think it's incumbent upon them to shift that relationship and that trust into a more technical channel. And so you've heard me and Sam talk about, we're starting to group members of credit unions into categories, right? Roughly 40% of them are now digital nomads.
Really? Okay.
Meaning that they will literally move from one FI to another for a service that they perceive as valuable to them. And the reason is because they can do it all on their phone, right? All I have to do is download the Fidelity app, and it takes me about 5 minutes to open up an account with Fidelity and move money into the account, right? That's what members and all consumers are demanding. They want their stuff to be instant. They want it to be invisible. And for the most part, they want the service surrounding it to be free. That's a challenge.
That to me is something that is such a challenge. I think is there's so much we can do that is perceived as free, right? So the idea of what service we're willing to pay for.
So somebody may be paying the bill in the background, but there's the consumer is looking at it to be free, right? Or to be even rewarded, right?
Absolutely. We're rewarded to shop, rewarded to do whatever we're doing. So it's something that's been on my mind when it comes to the regulation side of things is, we were just talking about fintech in those thousands of companies that are out there that are innovating. A lot of the times it seems like they're doing that kind of without the regulation because they just haven't maybe been noticed yet until after they're larger. I guess from your, kind of your previous answers, is that one of those reasons to look at partnering with them or seeing which ones we need to get in? Because a lot of times credit unions, banks, we both hear it. There's that common complaint that it's tough to move the bar forward when, the regulators are involved.
Yeah, This, Randy, is absolutely true. The reality is most of these startups start and they don't ever even think about what the FFE-IEC or the NCUA would think about their product or what they need to beat the standards to be doing business with a large credit union that's heavily regulated in this environment. I can speak from history, right? I started a company in the 90s. My business partner and I, we built this company. We wrote all the code, everything ourselves, right? Kind of in the back room while we were in graduate school. And we opened up, put our shingle out, and our notion was prepaid cards for college kids, right? And we were going to try and serve the campus that we were on. And we were open. We had hundreds of merchants that were ready to accept our cards. We had 50 or 60 cards, friends of ours and people we were just doing it to test with and make sure it was going to work. And lo and behold, the Texas Board of Banking comes in and says, guys, it feels like you're taking deposits. And we said, oh, no, we're selling points. And they said,
okay. Yep.
They said, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, we're going to call it a duck. And of course, we were 22 years old. We didn't know any better, right? But quickly we found out that regulatory bodies can affect you in a major way because we had to pivot the direction of the entire company. And that pivot obviously worked out. We built an awesome company and were able to sell that in the early 2000s. But I see it in today's world with every small company out there. They just don't know what they don't know typically when they get into the business.
Right. And then suddenly it comes up pretty quick on you. But once you have the success, my guess is. So this is a broad question. And it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about recently. But I'd really like to circle back to it because I think it is important. A recent conversation just, a few weeks back at CUNA GAC that Sam and I were talking about, and it was using myself as the example, my wallet, you know what I mean? I very rarely carry cash. I have a hobby that is basically travel rewards, Venmo the dog walker, the dog watcher when Jill and I travel, Apple Pay at Whole Foods. So I think of all the different ways that I spend money. How does the credit union make sure that somebody like me is still, looking at the credit union as top of wallet, and what's Co-op doing to help with that?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, those are all digital transactions, right?
Absolutely.
And I view that as Co-op's job is to help our credit unions be able to accept every type of digital type transaction that's out there, right? And so we were talking about that platform earlier. Our job is to give the credit union the tools. And so every time we release a product, we think about it in a couple of ways. I've got $20 million credit unions that we do business with, and we do business with the largest credit union in the country, right? And so I have to be prepared for what they need from me. And so every time we put something out, if it's got a member interface, we offer an app that is a standalone app. Then we offer a companion app, which they can embed into their digital banking platform that allows them to customize, colors and features and certain things like that, right? And then we also offer a full stack of APIs that allows them, if they want to build their own technology from soup to nuts, and all they want to do is hit our APIs to access that data and to push data back to us, then they're built for that. And here we've stopped talking about credit unions with regard to size because size doesn't necessarily mean sophistication. There's some fairly large credit unions that are still very much 10 years behind the curve. And there's some very small credit unions that have a team of 6 or 8 developers, and they're ready to engage with us on an API structure that you wouldn't necessarily have thought they would do. And so my job is to make all of that available to them so that they can keep you at the top of the wallet. Now, their job is to be willing to say, I'm willing to take the risk on some transactions that I probably might have declined last year because I won't want that cardholder to put their card in their wallet and choose somebody else's card. And it's also their job to listen to us and hear the trends that are happening, right? There's brick and mortar transactions are flat to falling on cards, but e-com is growing like crazy, and specifically card on file, which is Amazon Prime, Netflix, Uber, all these places where you put your card in one time and you never think about it again. My job is to convince these credit unions to do things that get their card at the top of that wallet. Because, once it goes in, it rarely ever changes. Yeah,
you never want to change the card that you have in Amazon or Apple Pay or something like that. It's just like once it's there, that's one.
Matter of fact, you probably don't even know how to, right? And so that's part of what we instruct our credit unions to do.
That's good stuff. If you break up the crystal ball for me, we were to sit down a year from now, what are you most proud of that you and the team at Co-op have accomplished in the next year?
Well, I'm going to tell you that everything's going to happen this year is based on the previous 2.5 years.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Building this platform out has been a monumental piece of work, right? MDM, which is Master Data Management Strategy, and all the security around that, moving applications up into the cloud has been a real adventure and an enormous amount of fun. But this year, when we get to the end of the year, we will have completed a complete retool of our contact center with modern technology and a customizable IVR, right? We'll have universal agent where we can have people working either in Des Moines or in Dallas at our contact center, and we can shift calls on the fly between those. We will have released a brand new disputes and chargeback system that will shave the time of a dispute or a chargeback in the system from 25 to 30 days down to just a few, right? And that's making not only our credit unions more efficient, but it's making the member experience way better, right? We'll have a completely new reporting and dashboarding engine called Insight Center that actually is rolling out here in the next month or so. And then we'll have the Cooper fraud score for card, just like we do now on the shared branch side. And that thing was so successful on the shared branching side, we literally took the fraud down to about 10% of what it was just 6 months ago when we introduced Cooper. Do I expect the same thing on cards? I probably don't, because that's harder to do, right?
Yeah.
But we expect Cooper to have a real impact on our fraud solutions as we introduce that score later this year. And then finally, well, actually not finally, this is kind of the last of the big items, right? All of our credit unions should be able to do digital issuance. So push the card right into the wallet in a lost and stolen type scenario or on a new issue type scenario so that you don't have to wait on the piece of plastic. And we think that acceptance at the merchants for NFC transactions or tap and go transactions is high enough now that is a valuable addition to our product set.
Oh, I was at GAC this last year. I forgot my wallet up in the room, but had my phone on me when I ran down to get a Starbucks from the hotel. And, I was like, oh, cool. Didn't have to run back up. I could just, tap and pay.
Imagine the scenario where you go back to your room and your wallet's not there. And you
absolutely. Yep.
But you're at GAC. And even the best people say, okay, well, it'll be tomorrow or the next day before we can get you that card, right? Well, you're stuck, but now you're not, because I can push a card right into your wallet, which is an awesome thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. It sounds like you guys have been having some fun. It's got to feel good to see all this hard work that you've done coming to fruition and being rolled out. It seems like it's going to be an exciting year.
I sort of think about it like, when they laid the railway across the United States, that's an enormous amount of work connecting all of those pieces together. And then suddenly you get to have a train go from one coast to the other coast. And I feel like the train is now on the tracks and we're moving forward. So
I love the analogy.
It is a great feeling. I'm super happy to be here.
That's awesome. So I'd like to jump into the leadership and life hacks portion of the show. The first question, what inspired you to take the gig? You said 3.5 years ago now as the CEO of Co-op Financial Services. Yeah,
I'm going to tell you, originally it was two things, and it was the people on the board, the search committee. So that's probably the first thing that got me going, because at first I kind of said, no, I kind of like my job. I kind of like where I am. But when I met the people in the search committee, I was just blown away by their commitment to their members and what they wanted to do with Co-op. Thought they were an incredible group of people. So that got me interested. And, I've been a credit union member since I was like 11 years old, mowing the neighbor's yard and having to deposit my check. And it is, hearing how they talked about their membership, realizing that I was a member, what I realized was, because Co-op was my largest customer when I was at First Data. And so then I started thinking, well, gosh, if I could bring my technical background and bring it into a company that's not a startup, right? That has a successful history, has hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, and then help launch Co-op into the next decade, wouldn't that be an incredible amount of fun? And so I think, the people started it, and then it was the opportunity that they described to me with what they thought they wanted to do, which is move away from this reseller notion and become a technology company. And so that sounded like an enormous amount of fun.
Something that was going through my head when you were talking about that was, the idea that Co-op was an established company with a long history. And like you said, the revenue in place already to start. On one side, I see where the excitement could come from. But on the other side, there had to be some, did you have the confidence, I guess, from talking to the search committee and the board that this was a ship that could be turned? You know what I mean? Because you could come in and just get bogged down by that's the way we've always done it.
Yeah, I would not characterize it, Randy, as a ship that needed to be turned necessarily.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the co-op probably would have been just fine continuing down the path, but the board, 4 years ago, and of course my board rotates, so we've got some new members and some of those guys have rolled off, but the vision that we talked about during the interview process, and frankly, it was the only way I was going to come, right? If we could roll it, because just managing a buyer's club is not something that is super exciting to me, right? And, yep. and Co-op was more than a buyer's club. I don't want to belittle what it was. It was an incredibly successful business that, literally over the last 15 years had grown from 30 or 40 million in revenue to 300 million.
Absolutely. Yep.
And, this year will be roughly 530, 40 million in revenue, right? And so we've not only changed out the tires and the engine and the drivetrain on this bus, while going 70 miles an hour, we've grown during the process, and so I think that is the challenge that I wanted, and it was what was incredibly inviting was the commitment of the board to spend the money necessary.
Okay, yeah, it's a big deal.
and they kept saying to me, "Look, the credit unions in this room have millions of dollars in unused capital that we need to put to work. Think about the 3,000 credit unions that are out there, and what if they just put what they're allowed to invest in CUSIS, if they just put half of that into Co-op, it's hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And so there's a great opportunity here, and I think that our board has realized how to take advantage of it and to seize it and build a technology platform for the credit union industry that they can own and control and drive into the future.
That's really cool. So how is that motivation? You talked about what, kind of got you into the gig. How has it changed over the past few years since you've actually been on the job?
Yeah, this is a fun question because I probably said yes for me. And I get up and go to work and stay every day because of our employees and those members, right? We have such a great team and passionate about helping credit union members. We're nearly 2,000 employees. We service, north of 60 million members. So it's awesome to see our team collaborating and thinking with our credit union partners on how we can get better every day. Our co-creation councils, those credit unions get in there, they roll up their sleeves and they work hard for, a couple of meetings every year to help us design what the future is going to look like. I love going to those things and watching that happen, right? It's a ton of fun. Treat your employees right, and they'll treat your customers right, and that works out good for the members in the long run.
So Co-op's a good size organization. I find it interesting that, you talked about in college, you had that obviously entrepreneurial side, but how would you describe there's a big difference between you and your partner starting a business, back in college and now running an organization. How would you describe your leadership style today?
I think, and I would hope everybody would describe it as collaborative, right?
Okay. Yep.
I think of myself as sort of a servant leader. I have a great team, and I went out and I tried to find the best people and keep the best people. And some people didn't work out, but get the right people, put them in something that they love doing and let them go do it. And then try and get stuff out of their way. If they get stuck or they get bogged down, whatever else, I'm there to help. And I was talking about Sam the other day. I was talking to Sam the other day, and I don't think even maybe it is Steve Jobs originally, but he had a quote that was, "I don't hire these people and pay them a lot of money so I can tell them what to do."
Right. Yep.
I bring them in, we point ourselves in a direction, and then I let them do the things that they're good at, right? I'm not good at everything, but I think I've built a team that is incredibly strong.
So is there something that Sam and the rest of the senior management team has heard you say so many times that they could finish your sentence?
Yeah, there's probably a couple of things. One, I've heard, none of them have actually said this to me, but I've heard that they've sort of figured out that when I'm being quiet, it means I probably disagree with them.
Okay.
It's probably partially true, but it's also probably me looking at how do I be thoughtful about my response if I plan to disagree. Because disagreeing with your team that takes a lot of, and I'd probably never disagree with the whole team. If 8 of them came at me and said, this is the right thing to do, there's almost zero chance I would override that. But I look at those folks as my family, and I sure wouldn't want to hurt their feelings. So I try to be very thoughtful about how I go back. And if you want words that I say that they've heard me say lots of times, it'd be, probably ownership.
Okay.
Take ownership of what you're doing. There's no passing the buck here. And that sort of relates to the second one, which is we are the they.
Okay.
When people say they don't are saying we can't do this or they, well, we have to realize we're the they, right? And so if our company's not moving forward and we're not getting things done, it's because we are messing it up somehow, and we need to get out of people's way, right?
I like that. That's a good one. I like that.
And if we don't own it, who's going to? Right?
Absolutely, right? Like that's what I love. Absolutely everything about that. You mentioned like if 8 of them, kind of are on the one path, you're probably not going to overrule that. I'm sure over the past few years and just over your career, you've had to make some difficult decisions that maybe people didn't like on the short term. Is that something you're good at? Is that something you've built up in yourself, the ability to do? Or it does sound like you try to bring people along on all those decisions, in more of a collaborative way. So,
yeah, from a personal side, I would say that, I don't know maybe how I was brought up or what, but even when we were in college and we were going out, I preferred to be the driver, the designated driver, right? If we're going on a ski trip, I would rather drive the whole 8 hours and let everybody else have fun than give up my responsibility that I could have, right, over that. So I think that is, it's always something that's sort of been innate.
Okay.
But
yep.
I also believe that if there weren't hard decisions in companies, we wouldn't need leaders.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
If it just kind of flowed along and we could do everything all the time, I've never been in an organization that didn't have more demand for resources than it had resources.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's just weird for me to think that that's possible. And so it's always about managing resources and making sure you choose the right things for the long-term survival of the company and its employees.
That is a great point. Is there a common myth about being a leader that you would like to debunk?
One, probably the most important one, is that we have all the answers.
Right.
No one has all the answers, right? I think good leaders go out, they build a team that they can trust, and they let them go do their stuff, right? And I think my job, just kind of like, I'm going to say raising kids, right? My wife and I always joke, we're the bumpers on the bowling alley, right? Just trying to keep them out of the gutter because you can't necessarily always predict which way they're going to roll. My job as CEO here is maybe even a little narrower field than that, right?
Right.
My job is to keep us focused. And then I tell my team, look, if I start bringing shiny objects to you, you tell me to stop until we have time to do something about it, right? And they do. Yeah, they do.
That is something that I've had to focus more on is not bringing all the shiny objects to the team. So I do like to chase the shiny object.
And I have to admit, I have a little propensity to chase shiny objects too.
Absolutely. When you think back to earlier in your career, maybe it's the shiny objects, but was there a mistake that you made or one that you see young leaders make over and over again? Kind of those, lessons we just have to learn on the job.
I think the biggest one I probably made is thinking you can do it all alone. Right. This is a team sport. And I think it's just been demonstrated time and time again that teams make better decisions than individuals. And so I would encourage people to invite expertise, invite criticism, and invite advice into your life and seek out people around you to help mentor and bring you forward. Right. Because alone is a long, hard slog.
Absolutely. Has there been a piece of advice or a life lesson that you've just carried with you throughout your whole career?
Well, I've already said one already, which is treat your people well and they'll treat your customers well. We're trying to build a culture here at Co-op of team and, we fight for each other and we're all together in this. It's harder across multiple locations than it would be if we were all in one location. But, that's the nature of the beast that we have created here, right? And so I'm not going to force everybody to up and move or anything like that. So we've got to create that culture And we got to use technology to help us create that culture. And you try to have a little fun with them at the same time. And then I think the other one that is probably, and I'll translate what it means, but I had a leader about 10 years ago say big animal pictures and accurate numbers.
Okay.
And really what he was saying was the ability to take very complex issues and distill those into a pretty simple drawing or picture for a presentation is the most powerful thing you can have in a leadership team, right? But always make sure that you don't mess up the numbers, right? The math behind the big animal picture is as important or more important than the actual picture, right? And so make it simple so everybody can understand it, but make sure you've done your homework behind the scenes. And that's probably the one that I've lived with for a while.
That's good stuff. Make sure it's simple and true, and the facts are there, right?
Simple and true. It seems almost intuitive, but not always.
But yeah, I'm sure we've both run into that before. Something I noticed in the first season of the podcast was many of the leaders on the show had mentors that were really important in their life. Did you have mentors growing up? Not growing up, but just kind of help shape you into the leader you are today?
Sure. I guess many is probably the right answer. And so I start with my father. He's probably the person who taught me work ethic.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in high school, when all the other kids were playing sports, I was leaving to go work because that, he believed that. And I joke with a lot of my friends. I made more money my junior and senior year of high school than I did my first 2 or 3 years out of college.
Well, that's funny. Wow.
Because I built such a big business in high school. And
wait, what business did you build in high school?
I was mowing lawns. And,
no kid. Did you have a team or something?
2 or 3 employees and about 70 or 80 yards in high school.
That's fantastic.
And then I would say after that, probably in my 20s, my best friend's father was hugely influential in my life. Just, great leader, great man, was president and CEO of a bank, and I got to speak with him often. And so he was hugely influential in my early years. And more recently, 2 leaders at First Data who I thought were great folks, Barry McCarthy, who is now CEO of Deluxe Corporation up in Minneapolis. He's hired me twice in my career, so I obviously like him.
He sees something in you.
And I like his style, right? His style is, he doesn't blow up. He doesn't lose control. He's not aggravated. He's just like, okay, let's move on and solve the problem. And I really like that. And then for a short window of time, I got the opportunity to work for a guy named Joe Forehand, who was the former CEO of Accenture for many years, took them from, 2,000 employees to 250,000 employees, and just the kindest, nicest guy. And that whole notion of making things simple is something that Joe was really good at. And so watching him perform was pretty cool.
Sounds like a good group there. Question that I've added to the show this year is because I think a lot of people wonder. You mentioned the first few months, 6 months at Co-op, you were spending time going to see a bunch of credit unions and seeing what their needs were. But what does the typical day today look like work-wise for Todd? And what's that perfect day, if you could have one, the unicorn? I'm a pretty early riser, so I'm typically up around 5 or 5:30 every morning. If I'm in Atlanta, which is pretty rare, I try and walk my dog and take my daughter to school before the normal workday starts. So it's time I can spend with her. And my 2 boys are out of school, and so they're off in college. So we don't get to stay as close as we would if they were at home. But I tend to have, somewhere 4 to 6 hours of calls every day. And I try and talk to a client, sometimes 2 every day. It just, keeps me connected with what's going on. I squeeze in a little lunch. I don't eat breakfast, so I squeeze in a little lunch somewhere. And then I always try and block off a couple of hours so that I can do the stuff that I need to do, the thinking and the catching up on email and the approvals and all those things that happen for every CEO out there. And so that's typical. And I guess the antithesis of that is I'm on a plane, I fly somewhere, I have a meeting, I fly home. And those days are harder, but necessary for what we do, right? Mm-hmm.
And as far as a perfect work day, anytime I get to have client interaction that results in a positive conclusion for me and that client, that's a good work day. I love winning, but more than that, I love putting together a solution that works for a credit union and making their members happy.
That sounds like the cool part of the gig, right? So before we move on to the last part of the show, the last question is, what passions do you have outside of work? What do you do to recharge, and what does that work-life balance look like to you?
I would say that I always joke, most of my friends are people that I work with.
Yeah.
I have a couple of friends outside of the office, and we see each other fairly regularly. But I typically would probably choose to do something with my wife or kids.
Okay.
And they have different interests. So I'll just say that it varies from hiking, golfing, hunting, and fishing to even occasionally playing some video games. And so depending on which child I'm with, there's a wide variety of things that can be done. I even occasionally have been known to go get my nails done with my daughter.
There you go. Daddy-daughter day.
Absolutely. Hashtag girl dad, right?
Girl dad. That's right. Yeah, this is everywhere. So the last part of the show, I know you're busy, so I want to keep this moving. The rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers do not have to be, though. So you mentioned having a thriving business in high school. What were you like in high school? And do you remember the first time you got into memorable trouble?
Yeah, I was a geek in high school, and it's sort of embarrassing to say that, but I was into computers, and that's when computers were like the Apple IIc. So, it's probably something you don't really remember, Randy, but, my best friend was the valedictorian, and so I wasn't quite as good a student as he was, but we hung out a lot. I worked a ton because I knew that if I wanted a good car, I had to pay for it. And if I wanted to go to college, I had to pay for some of it. And as far as getting in trouble, I grew up in a small town, Amarillo, Texas, and my dad played golf with the chief of police every Saturday morning. So you can rest assured that I was in trouble all the time.
And you were going to get caught no matter what.
Yeah, right. My dad always knew about it well before anybody else did.
Yeah, before anyone else did. Most of us stumbled into our careers in one way or the other. When you were younger, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think first probably a cowboy or something like that. But then as I got a little older, as I was going to college, I studied electrical engineering for 3 years, Randy, and just decided I couldn't be a design board engineer.
Yep.
And so I pivoted and finished with a degree in economics with the intent to go to law school. And to be honest with you, when we started our business, I was in graduate school getting some, leveling type stuff that it would fit to go to law school.
Yeah.
And that business started taking off and being successful. And I couldn't be happier now that I'm here. We have a great legal staff here, and I love what they do for us, but I just don't know that I would want to do it. So.
You're glad that's not you.
Yeah, so. I'm glad I've got a team that does that.
That's fantastic. Do you have any daily routines that you have to do, or else your day just feels off?
Yeah, so maybe a couple, right? I have to shower every morning. Some people can wait till later in the day or whatever, but I don't drink coffee. And so it's kind of like my coffee. It's how I wake up. So I tend to jump out of bed and will walk the dog and then immediately shower, or sometimes we'll shower before I walk the dog. And just a way to wake up. And then at night, much to the dismay of my wife, it's best for me to have the TV on. I don't care what's on. But to have the TV on as I'm going to sleep, because it settles all the conversations that go on in my head, so I can focus on something besides all the stuff I have to do tomorrow. So those are probably the two things.
It's funny you say that. I know Jill scratches her head about that with me, where if things are on my mind, I'll leave bed and just go turn on the TV and lay on the couch, because it just shuts it all down. Even if she's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "I have no idea. No clue." But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's just distraction.
The random question: what's the best album of all time? That one you can listen to without skipping a song.
I'm sort of a technology guy, Randy. Can I just take my Spotify account and call that good? I love the variety. So
yeah.
If I had to say, there was a time when I thought Journey was the greatest band of all time, and that was probably in the 80s.
Yep.
And there was a time where maybe the Eagles were, and then for a short window of time, U2 was at the top of the hit parade. Nowadays, I barely keep up with it enough to even remember the names of singers and songwriters.
I am with you. The picking the kind of random stations on Spotify or Apple Music has made it so it's fantastic.
It's fun to have a song pop out of nowhere and just like, oh man, I love this song.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a reader. Jill and we have a stack of books in the house that keeps on growing because of recommendations from this show. Is there a book that you've either gifted to people over time, or one that you just think everybody should read?
Well, I would. How about if I answer with the one I've enjoyed the most over the last few years, which is probably Empire of the Summer Moon.
Okay, I haven't read that.
It's a Pulitzer winner. It's about the rise and the fall of the Comanche tribe in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. And,
okay.
It gives you a real indication. When you read this book, I will say parts of it are gory because life was hard in the 1700s and 1800s in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandles, right? And so it gives you an indication of how easy we have things now versus the way things were 200 years ago, 150 years ago.
You are adding to that stack of books. I'll have to pick that one up.
It's all about Quanah Parker, and he was the Comanches, which I'm a little bit Comanche. I don't know how much exactly, but my great-great-grandmother or something like that was a full-blood Comanche Indian. And so I haven't done the math to figure out if I'm 1/8 or 64th or 128th. I don't really care. But it's about Quanah Parker and the fall of the Comanches. And so it's a pretty interesting read.
That sounds like an interesting read. My favorite question is you've gotten older. What's become more important to you? And the best part of it, what's become less important?
Time. Yeah. Time is the only thing I can't make more of easily. It's just anything that saves me time is a thing that I will invest in. And so therefore technology is my friend. And what's become less important? I don't know that there's anything that's less important in my life. I just try and squeeze it all in and find more time to do it. Stuff doesn't matter as much to me as it used to, but maybe that's because I'm in a position to have more of it than I used to. So
we're fortunate that way, right? Do you have, it's an interesting thing. Early on in the second season, I had asked the question to a few of the first guests if they had like a new, like an app or something, like you mentioned, technology. That's something that like you just need to have. And quite honestly, the answer was too often Outlook. So I kind of took that out of the show. But you mentioned technology, freeing up your time. I use Evernote for everything to organize my life. Is there something you're using or an app we should be taking a look at?
Well, I don't use the apps to organize my life. That's a joke, actually. My calendar tells me what to do every day.
Right. Yep.
And so I wake up, and sometimes I even think to check it before I go to bed. But I wake up and whatever my phone says to do is typically what I do. And that's managed by a group of people. But, I always talk to people about AT&T Call Protect or Hiya, which eliminates the vast majority of all those robocallers.
Okay.
And I've gotten to now where I can almost pretty much function without my laptop because my phone does so much for me. Oh, and there's another one called Tunity. Have you ever tried Tunity?
I have not. No.
So Tunity, if you are in a room like a sports bar or something like that, and the TV's on, but the sound is not on, and you want to hear the song,
okay,
you can take Tunity, point it at the TV, it will find the channel, and it'll play the audio through your phone, so you can listen to what's going on up there.
That's fantastic. That seems like it'd be helpful in airports and stuff too. We're both on the road quite a bit. So
that's exactly right. If you want to hear the news and they don't have the sound on, you can tune it in and.
You may have just made my life a little bit better. I appreciate that. So there's one question I didn't send you. When you hear the word success, who's the first person that comes to mind?
Wow. Big picture, I would say that when we were starting our company, it was during the rise of Microsoft.
Okay.
Computers was coming along. What Gates did there was incredible. I also happened to go to college at the same time at the University of Texas that Michael Dell was there. And so bought software in his little shop when I was a freshman in college. And by the time I graduated, he had thousands of employees. And so from a business perspective, that's it. And then, from a personal success, nobody would know his name, so I won't say it. But there's a man I've, wanted to model my family life after. Just, long time married, great kids, great family life. They spend a lot of time together. They still laugh and joke with each other all the time. I hope that that's the type of family that we're bringing up. That would be a huge success, having my kids off on their own and yet still want to come home and spend time with mom and dad.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think the perfect way to wrap up the show. I appreciate you, Todd, for taking the time. The last question I have of you is any final asks of our audience or final thoughts you'd like to share?
Listen, I know I'm here because I lead Co-op, and Co-op is a credit union thing. And so if you hear anything, know that we're changing. Anytime you change, things go bump in the night. We're not perfect, and I doubt we ever will be, but we are a rapidly evolving technology company, and we're owned by credit unions and for the benefit of credit unions. And so I would encourage all credit unions to think of us as the tool that we are and use us properly, right? Get involved and tell us what you want us to do, and then let's see if we can go get it done for you. And if you haven't talked to us, give me a call.
That is awesome. We will link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. If people do have more questions or additional questions of you, do you on the Twitter machine, LinkedIn, email, do you have a preferred way for people to reach out to you or your team?
Yeah, you can just reach me email at todd.clark, todd.clark at coop.org.
Awesome.
Anytime you want.
That is perfect. We will link to that. And Todd, thank you again. I hope you have an amazing day.
Thanks, Randy. Talk to you soon.
Before we go, I would like to send out a big thank you to all of you, our listeners. I wouldn't be able to have this much fun having these conversations and getting to do what I do if it weren't for all of you tuning in. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And once again, I'd like to thank Todd for taking the time out of his busy schedule to be on the show. It was an absolute blast having this conversation with him. And finally, a big thank you to our sponsors, Co-op Financial Services, that Todd happens to be the CEO of. Make sure to click on all their links that you'll find all over the show notes. Show them some love. See everything they have going on to help drive our movement forward. One last thing is I do have an ask for you. We are on all the podcast players out there, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and so on. We would greatly appreciate it if you subscribed, maybe leave us a 5-star rating on the old Apple podcast machine, a review even better. It helps with the visibility of the show and us spreading this credit union love. If you don't think we're worth the 5 stars, please just forget that I asked, and you can reach out to me directly and let me know where we can improve. Don't forget also about the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. Get your next book delivered to you from the recommendations of the thought leaders that have been on the show, including the one that Todd mentioned today. That'll be adding to my stack. So thank you all again for listening, and have a great day.